So no problem then. Pushkar, I start?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in the last class we had talked about we have talked about threads and scheduling problems for your operating system syllabus, and I have to share. Okay, you can see the screen.
Yes, sir, visible.
Able to see the okay. So today we are going to start our discussion. So in your scheduling problems, we talked about a few scheduling algorithms, and there was one scheduling algorithm that was also given in your lab. है ना? So today we are going to start our discussion with process synchronization. Okay, and we will illustrate or understand the concept of process synchronization using a producer consumer problem. So what is a producer and a consumer problem? So let's say we have two processes. One process is called the producer P and the other process is called the consumer C. The idea is that the producer process produces some item which are to be consumed by the consumer process. Now, the items produced by the producer will go to the consumer. The producer process is an independent process. It should be able to generate items independent of the consumer process. So, we would also want the consumer process to be able to consume items independently of the producer. Okay, so that these two, the basic idea is to make these two processes run concurrently. Once they are independent, they can run concurrently. Now, here is the catch. If the producer process, yes, anyone saying something? No. Now, if the producer process can generate items at the rate the consumer process consumes, then there is no problem. Okay. If the producer process P produces at a rate faster than the consumer process C can consume, then naturally some item will be lost. Okay. On the other hand, if C consumes at a rate faster than P, that means faster than P can produce, then C has to wait for the availability of the items. Okay. So a natural solution to avoid this problem is to have a buffer between your producer process and your consumer process, which is illustrated by the second diagram. Someone wanted to join or what? Okay. Now, so instead of directly, for the second diagram, so instead of directly sending data, you have some buffer pool, intermediate buffer pool. So the producer will produce items and put them in the buffer pool, which is essentially an array of buffers, or it can be an array of buffers basically. And the consumer will consume from this buffer pool. So excess production or excess demand will not be a problem, as it will now be handled by this buffer pool. Okay. Now, even in this case, there can be two types of scenarios. Okay. One is what is the case, what is known as the unbounded buffer, which means that there is no limitation on the buffer size. And the other is the case of bounded buffer, that means there is a limitation on the buffer size. Okay. Now, in the case of unbounded buffer, there is no problem, as whatever is the production rate, there will always be some space in the buffer which will be able to handle that production rate. But in the case of bounded buffer, if our assumption is the production rate is more than the consumer rate, then there will be a time when all the locations in the buffer will be full. Okay. So P has to wait, in that case, P has to wait for C to empty a slot. Again, if C, the consumer rate, is higher than the producer rate, P, then C will find at one point of time the buffer to be empty. So C in that case has to wait for P to produce and place an item in the buffer. Okay, so this is the case when you have a bounded buffer. Also, in the case of unbounded buffer, your consumer process C has to wait if rate of consumption is more than production. Okay, so both these cases, a bounded buffer and unbounded buffer, will have some challenges that needs to be addressed. Anyway, now, so when we are talking about process synchronization, we definitely want that there will not be any waiting time, or there will be not a case where any of the processes basically has to wait for the intermediate buffer to be either filled or empty, whatever is the case. So process synchronization is the case where we have to avoid this natural or general conditions and see that both the processes can run smoothly without effectively losing any effective CPU time. Okay, your CPU should not be used for unproductive purposes. So that is what we mean by process synchronization. And this thing, to put forward the idea, we took help of a very popular problem which is known as the producer and the consumer problem. Now, we will go deeper into this producer and consumer problem. So, since I said that the producer process P and the consumer process C should be independent so that they can run concurrently, we can always put this problem in a co-begin co-end environment. If you remember precedence graphs, when we were talking about precedence graphs, we were drawing precedence graphs to define processes which can be run concurrently as well as sequentially. Okay, so the first diagram that I showed from P to C is also a precedence graph. Now, as I said, since these are concurrent processes, we can always put them in a co-begin co-end environment. So let us first see the variables we need to generate this code or program. So the first is type item. This one. So some item which is of variable type. Okay. So the producer can produce an item of type item. This is the idea. So when the consumer consumes an item, it will consume an item of type item. So this is what I mean by the first statement, type item, and I begin my variable initialization with this particular statement. Then the variables we need are a buffer, and we assume it to be a buffer having n number of locations. This one. So we will declare this buffer to be an array of 0 to n minus 1 number of locations of type item. Okay, now, we need pointer or indices to point an item in the buffer. So we will here have two pointers. One is pointer in and the other is pointer out. Okay, and they can assume values from 0 to n minus 1, since the buffer is an array of 0 to n minus 1. And we will use two more variables, next P and next C of type item. These two variables. Okay, what is the need of these two variables? So the assumption here is whenever the producer produces an item, it will be assigned to next P, and then from next P, it will be loaded onto the buffer when some location in the buffer is free. Similarly, when the consumer consumes an item, it takes that item from the buffer, puts it in next C, and subsequently the consumer will consume it. And we will also initialize the two pointers in and out to be equal to 0. Okay, so now this is our variable initialization. And once we have our variables, we will now move on into writing our code. That is, writing a code to explain the producer and the consumer problem. So I move to slide number 3. So I have shared the slides in your WhatsApp group also. You can check from there if bandwidth is low. So I will now move to slide number 3, where I am showing the code for the producer portion. Okay, so for the producer process. So the producer process, so I have a co-begin environment. The co-end environment will be at the end of the consumer process. Now, so here is the code for the producer process. It is written in a begin and end construct. Okay. So the producer process produces an item which is placed in next P. So this one, I'm talking about this line. The producer process produces an item which is placed in next P. So after that, the producer process will check if there is any vacant space in the buffer or not. Once it has produced a item, it will place that item into next P, and after that what it will do is it will check whether there is an empty slot in the buffer or not. And if the buffer is full, the condition will be this condition that I have written in the do while statement, inside the do while statement. Skip means do nothing. Okay. So the condition will be in plus 1 mod n is equal to out. So when this condition is true, that is there is no empty space in the buffer, the producer process will remain in this while loop. Okay, this while loop. Skip means doing nothing. So it will simply go on executing this while loop. But when this condition is broken, that is the while loop is broken, it will come to the next step, that is place the item into the buffer using next P at location in. So when this while loop condition is broken, it will come out and it will execute the next statement where it will place the item that is in next P into the buffer at location in. Okay. Then in is incremented by 1 following a modular arithmetic, and this is essentially gives a circular nature to the buffer. Okay. We call it a circular buffer. The buffer concept that I am using is a circular buffer concept. Okay, so this is the idea of the producer process. Similarly, we will have a code for the consumer process also. So I move to the next slide, slide number 4, where I have written the code for the consumer process. So if you see, both the producer and the consumer process will be within the same co-begin and the co-end statement. So it started with the co-begin statement, and here it's the co-end statement. And for the consumer process, we are writing the consumer process within a begin and end construct. So the producer process was within a begin and end construct. The consumer is within a begin and end construct. And both these begin and end statements are within co-begin and co-end. That means that both this consumer and producer process are running concurrently. Okay. Now, for the consumer process, it will check whether in is equal to out or not. That is this statement. So if in is equal to out, that is the condition that the buffer is empty. If the buffer is empty, there is no item that the consumer can consume. So the buffer will wait in this while loop. Okay, now when in is not equal to out, that is there is some item in the buffer the consumer can consume. It takes item from, it will execute this statement. It takes that item from the buffer following the out pointer into the variable next C. It will load that item from the buffer using this out pointer into your next C. Out is basically the location of the buffer now. And then it will modify the pointer out in the next step. So that is where the while loop in the producer process will be broken. So if you remember, the producer code, the condition for the producer process was this one, to come out of the while loop. So this is the out statement which will be broken from here in the consumer process. When your consumer process operates, it increments the out statement, and herein your while loop for the producer process gets broken. Similarly, in is equal to out, this condition here, this condition for the consumer process, in is equal to out. This condition will be broken by the producer process if the producer process produces an item and puts into the buffer, then in equal to out condition will be false. Okay, here. If the producer process produces an item and puts into the buffer, it updates the in statement, thereby changing the in equal to out statement in the consumer process. Okay. So after that, the consumer will consume the item in next C. This is what I have written in its own time. Okay, whenever we don't care about it. And you will find that both the producer and the consumer process are kept under the repeat until false structure. Okay, both the producer and the consumer, I have kept it under the repeat until false structure. So we assume that the producer and the consumer process go on operating indefinitely. Now, instead of this while statement, you can also write the code using a variable called count. Okay, instead of using while in is equal to out, I can write while count is equal to 0, do skip. Okay, and after out, I add another sentence, count is equal to count minus 1. It will do the same job. Okay, similarly, I can update the producer statement in slide number 3, again using a count variable. So instead of this statement, while in plus 1 mod n is equal to out, do skip, I can replace this statement with while count is equal to n, do skip. And then after the in is updated, I will update the count variable also by 1. So here I am incrementing the count by 1, and in the consumer process I am decrementing the count by 1. Okay. So basically for the producer process, count is equal to n means the buffer is full and p cannot put an item in the buffer. Similarly, for the consumer process, if count is equal to 0, that is what I am initializing in the while loop. If count is equal to 0, it means that the buffer is empty. Okay. If count is greater than 0, only in that case the consumer can consume an item. And it has to be reduced by 1, because now the number of items present in the buffer is less by 1 because the consumer has consumed. Okay. So either you can use this statement using in or out, or you can use the variable count. Both are okay. Now, here is the catch. What is happening here is count, if you observe, is a shared variable, which is shared by both the producer and the consumer process. And both this producer and the consumer process runs concurrently. Okay. So the value of count may not remain the same for the producer and the consumer process, because both these processes are running concurrently. Both these processes are using a same shared variable. So what is supposed to be the count for an iteration of P to be the expected iteration in C may not be the same, because C is also updating count at the same time. So this leads to some discrepancy in your code. Okay. And this discrepancy basically leads us to the concept of what is known as a critical section problem. Okay, now. So, what is a critical section problem? The regions wherever a shared variable has to be modified, that region has to be tackled in a special way. I repeat, the region wherever a shared variable has to be modified, that region of the code has to be tackled in a special way, because these types of problems are what we call it as the critical section. Okay. So whenever one process executes in the critical section, which is the part of the code where a shared variable is going to be modified, no other processes should be allowed to execute in the corresponding critical section. Okay, so it means that whenever the producer process is using your shared variable count, is using the critical section, your consumer process will have to wait. It cannot use or operate on the shared variable count when the producer process is working on. This is the idea. Okay. So whenever the producer process is trying to modify the variable count, the consumer process should not be given access to count and vice versa. That means access to critical section must be mutually exclusive, so that no more than one process should be allowed to access it at any point of time. So I move to slide number 5. Okay. And here in this slide, we try to define what is the solution to the critical section problem. So the critical section problem is basically multiple processes are trying to use a shared variable or a section of the code where we have shared variables. And because if all of them are using that shared variable at the same time, it will lead to some discrepancy. So the concept is all processes cannot use it at the same point of time. If one is using it, all other have to wait. So the first criteria of a solution to the critical section problem is mutual exclusion. Okay. The second, there are other requirements also. The second requirement is what is called as the progress, and the third requirement is what is known as the bounded waiting. So what is mutual exclusion? I already talked about it once more. If I have n number of processes, P1, P2, P3 to P of n, then only one process can be allowed to enter the critical section and the rest has to wait. When this process finishes execution, the other processes will be allowed to enter. This is mutual exclusion. Now, what is progress? Now, it is also possible that not all the processes are interested to enter the critical section, but only a subset wants to enter or use the critical section, and the rest of the processes do not want to use the critical section at any given instant of time. This can happen. So the progress requirement says that the decision on which process wants to enter the critical section must be taken only on those processes or the subset of the processes that are willing to enter the critical section. And this decision must be taken in finite time. Okay, so two things for progress. One is you have to consider only those processes that are willing to enter the critical section at any given point of time, and you have to take a decision among those processes in a finite time. Now, the next condition is what is known as bounded waiting. What is bounded waiting? Let's say a process PI wants to enter the critical section, okay, but has to wait for another process to leave because that process is already occupying the critical section. Okay. So let's say PI has put a request at time T0 to enter the critical section. Now, only when the process currently using the critical section finishes execution, the request of PI can be considered. Okay. But the process which just left the critical section after using it, let's call that process as P of J, okay, because of which P of I was waiting. Okay. Say P of J, once it has finishes executing the critical section, what it does it may request access to the critical section again. So क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे? At time T0, what we are finding is P of I and P of J are both requesting access to the critical section, although P of J has used the critical section once. And it may so happen that the scheduler gives access to P of J, and P of I is kept waiting indefinitely. It may so happen. So this brings to the bounded waiting criteria. So the bounded waiting says that when a process P of I puts a request for entering the critical section, the number of other processes who can enter the critical section before P of I gets entry into the critical section must be bounded. Okay. So these are the three conditions which are considered to be the solution to a critical section problem. And then here on this side, we have a general structure where we can say that if we have, because this is more or less generally true, if we have a critical section in a code, the entire code can be broken into a number of sections. Okay. Now, the section of the code implementing, okay, so now each process must request permission to enter its critical section. Okay. Now, the section of the code implementing this request is the entry section. So this is what I have highlighted here. Okay. The critical section, then we have the critical section, and then the critical section will be followed by a, or maybe followed by an exit section. Okay. And the remaining code is the remainder section, which is this one. Now, remainder section is essentially part of the code which is not involved in any critical section. So it can be above your entry section also. The remainder section can be above here also. Okay. So basically, remainder section is the portion of the code which is not involved with the critical section. Only the entry and the exit sections are the ones that deal with the, or are directly related to your critical section. Okay. And the do while statement here, the do while statement basically indicates repeat until false. So whenever there is a critical section in a code, you can break that code into a sequence of sections, and every section will have this general structure. Okay. Okay. So this was the idea of critical section. What is it basically? And now we will go into defining a type of variable which is known as the semaphore variable. Okay. So I move to slide number 6. Okay. And we will come to why are we defining a semaphore variable just after critical section. Okay. So let us try to understand what is a semaphore variable. Now, a semaphore variable is a special kind of integer variable which can be initialized and can be accessed only through two types of atomic operation. One is called a P operation and another is the V operation. Okay, so you know these stuffs. So basically it is an integer variable which can be initialized. So you can initialize or give a value to this variable, and you can only access this variable, which we call it as the semaphore variable, through two types of atomic operations. One is what is known as the P of S, the P operation. Also in some books it is known as the wait operation, and another is also known as the V operation, or in some books it also refers to as the signal operation. Okay. Now, so if we define S to be a semaphore variable, as I said, then the operations I can do on S is initialize a value or operate this value to this true operation. Then so in P of S operation, what happens in the P of S operation? Nothing much. The value of S will be first checked. If S is less than equal to 0, then the process executing the P of S statement will remain in the while loop. Okay, so that is what I am basically writing with the while and do, and then you can essentially write skip, which basically means no operation. Only when the value of S is greater than 0, it will come to the next statement, this statement, and decrement the value of S by 1, and then proceed with the other remaining statements of the code. So this is essentially your P of S operation. And for the V of S operation, the value of S is simply incremented by 1. And what we are assuming here is, we will assume both this P of S and V of S operations are atomic in nature, which means when a process starts an operation of P of S or V of S, whenever a process starts an operation of P of S or V of S, the process cannot be interrupted. That means you cannot take the CPU away from that process unless and until it has finished executing P of S or the V of S. So basically, you cannot do context switching here. Here. Now, let us see how we can implement. This is the idea of defining the semaphore variable after critical section. So now what we are going to see is how we can implement the mutual exclusion problem of the critical section using semaphore. Okay, so this is what I am doing here in the next part of the slide. So let's say, or let us consider we have a semaphore variable called mutex. Mutex is a semaphore variable and we assign mutex to be equal to 1. As I had said, you can initialize a semaphore variable. So then what we do? For every process P of I, for every process P of Y, we perform the following sequence of operation. If there are a number of processes executing a similar kind of code to share the same critical section, the first process which executes P mutex. So let us consider there are n number of processes which are executing a similar kind of code to share the same critical section. Okay, then the first process which will execute this P mutex statement will find the value of P mutex to be equal to 1. So the while loop, since it is equal to 1, this statement is broken. So while loop will be broken and the process will enter the critical section. Okay. At the same time, mutex will be decremented by 1 to become 0. Now, as long as the process is in the critical section, the value of mutex will remain equal to 0. If any other process wants to enter the critical section, it will have to execute P mutex and will find mutex is equal to 0 and will have to remain in the while loop because S is now less than or equal to 0. In this case, it is equal to 0. Only when the first process comes out of the critical section and performs the vmutex operation or performs the vmutex or basically executes the vmutex statement, the other processes will be able to enter the critical section. Because mutex will now be incremented by 1 when you execute the vs statement. So mutex will be equal to 1. So the process waiting in the while loop now finds mutex to be greater than 1. The while loop condition is broken and it can enter the critical section. So here, basically, with the help of semaphore variable, I'm trying to exemplify that we can implement the mutual exclusion problem of the critical section solution very easily. Okay. What are the other things that we can do? We can also use semaphore variables to for process synchronization. Okay, so we go to the next slide, that is slide number 7. Okay, now here what I am doing. Here again I have a precedence graph, this one. So let us consider a precedence graph where a statement Si precedes the statement Sj. That means the statement Sj can be executed only after the execution of S of I, where Si and Sj belong to different processes running concurrently. Okay. So this is a process synchronization problem. Because you have two processes which are running concurrently. One statement S of I belongs to one process and the other statement S of j belongs to another process. Both these processes, say P1 and P2, here I am trying to explain it in more. P1 and P2 are running concurrently, and you are saying that you want a condition where S of I will precede S of j. Okay, so S of j can only operate when S of I has finished execution. Okay, so how can you do that using semaphore? So we can solve this problem by So let us define a semaphore variable called sync. So here I am defining a semaphore variable called sync, and I am initializing sync to be equal to 0. Okay. Now, since s of j cannot be executed before s of I, we can put a statement p sync before s of j. Okay. So now, since sync is equal to 0, your while loop condition is s is less than or equal to 0. Okay. So p sync will remain in while loop unless sync becomes greater than 0. Sync can be made greater than 0 only by the vsync operation. So my statement will be si followed by vsync, which I am doing it here. Okay, so this part may be executed. So this part on the left, so this part may be executed by one process, and this may be executed by another process. So these two processes may run concurrently, but the psync and the vsync statements will ensure that s of j cannot run before si is being executed. Okay, so here I have just made use of, or I have broken down. So if I have two processes, P1 and P2, and I have, let's say, this many statements, then if I want Si to be implemented first before Sj, I will take help of a semaphore variable called S, initialize it to 0, and put it above S of j, and I will use Vs below S of I, and this will do my job. Yeah. Okay. Now, let's go to the next slide, slide number 8. And here, what I'm basically trying to do is, I'm basically trying to get deeper into this concept of process synchronization using semaphore variable. How I can synchronize multiple processes using a semaphore variable. So on the extreme left, I have a precedence graph. This one. Okay. So this precedence graph is basically a sequence of statements, which are some of which are executed in parallel concurrently, and some are sequentially. So if you observe this, S1, after S1, S2 and S3 are executed concurrently, then S4, S5, S6 and S7 and so on. Now, the idea is how you can write this process synchronization. This is a case of process synchronization. So how you can write this or express this precedence graph with the help of semaphore. So what I am doing here is, I will obviously start with the begin and end construct for this portion of my code, and then I will define a co-begin and co-end construct within the begin and end construct. So every statement within the co-begin and the co-end construct will run concurrently. Okay, and within every within the co-begin and co-end statement, I have multiple begin and end statements, which are basically indicating processes which are running in parallel concurrently. Okay, again. Now let's see what we this one, the first one. What it is doing is, now from the graph we can see that S1 executes first, followed by S2 and S3. Okay, so what I am doing is, I write in this code S1 followed by S1 followed by V of A and V of B, where A and B are semaphore variables initialized to 0. Okay. Now the semicolon here, the semicolon, it means that S1 semicolon VA semicolon VB, it means that S1 statement is executed, after that V of A will be executed, and then the V of B statement will be executed. The process has these statements which will be executed sequentially. Then in the second process, I have P of A statement followed by S2, then S4, then V of C, V of D, where again C and D are semaphore variables which will be initialized to 0. Okay, let's see what is happening here. So P of A, this particular statement will ensure that S2 will be executed after S1 execution is over, because after S1 execution is over, your V of A will make A is equal to 1. Until then, your P of A has to wait in the while loop, because until then S will be equal to 0, which is a condition of the while loop. Okay. So your S2 statement will be forced to wait until and unless your A becomes greater than 0, which is only possible when V of A will be executed. Okay. So in this way, I am ensuring that your S2 will be executed only after S1 finishes its execution. Now, after S2 is executed, we see that it will execute S4. So that is why I have put S4 after S2, and then I have V of C and V of D. Okay. Then in the third process, I have P of B followed by S3 followed by V of E. Now, same here for the second process, what I am doing, the same thing I am doing here for P of B. Unless and until P of B is equal to is greater than 0, it will not execute S3. Okay. And S3 comes after S1 is execution is over. So once S1 is execution is over, V of B will be made 1, and then S3 will start working. Okay. And the rest of the code, you can figure it out. It's very easy. I have used multiple semaphore variables in V and P statements to make this precedence graph work. Okay. So what we can conclude from this particular graph is that for particular statement is that we have used 7 semaphore variables, okay, which I have written above, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all of these semaphore variables will be initialized to 0. And then we will make this code. Okay. So if you are given a problem on a precedence graph and you are explained to explain that or write the code for that graph using semaphore variables, so you can do those or solve those types of problems. Okay. Now, in this example, what we can see is that we have 6 processes running concurrently. These 6 processes. Here, we have 6 processes running concurrently. That is, all of these 6 processes are in the ready state. Okay, so if you remember the state diagram, you have the waiting state, which is a state which is in the secondary memory, and from there you are brought to the ready state, that is the main memory, and from the ready state, your CPU scheduler basically decides which process will be going into the CPU. Okay. So the CPU scheduler here takes one process after the other and gives them to the CPU for execution. Now, if the second and third process are given to the CPU for execution, these 2 processes I am talking about, the second process and the third process. If these 2 processes, since all these processes are running concurrently, if these 2 processes are given to the CPU for execution, and if the execution of the first process is incomplete, this one, if the execution of the first process is incomplete, then the first and the second process, what it will be do is, it will be executing themselves in the while loop without giving any fruitful result. Because your A is still equal to 0. The first process has not finished its execution. So P of A and P of B will remain in the while loop and will be moving into the while loop. So essentially what is happening is, without giving it is not giving any fruitful result, but it is consuming the CPU time. Okay, so this condition is what is known as the busy waiting problem. And this problem can be overcome by modifying the semaphore structure and redefining the semaphore operation. So This brings us to the definition of what is known as record-based semaphore. What is a record-based semaphore? So we now define the semaphore. Initially, we had defined semaphore to be what? We have defined it to be an integer, which you can initialize. You can give a value. Now, instead of that, we will be defining the semaphore to be a structure or a record which will have two fields. One field will contain the integer value, the other field will be a list of processes waiting for that semaphore. Here, so it will now be a structure or a record which will have two fields. One is the one field which will contain the value, the integer value of the semaphore. The other field will contain a list of processes that are waiting to get access to that semaphore value. Okay, and you put an end and you define the semaphore construct like this. Okay, so I define a type semaphore, type then semaphore, which is equal to record. Okay, so type can be type is also known as a user-defined type or an enumerated type. Okay, so this record will have two fields. One is the value of the field type integer, and another is the L, which is a list of processes. And we end it with the type declaration. Now, whenever I define a semaphore variable S, it will have two fields where the value part will be accessed by s.value and the list of processes waiting will be accessed by s.l. Okay, so this is basically a Pascal-like language that we are using to define the semaphore. So if I have a variable s, which is a semaphore, then s.value will essentially give me the integer value assigned to that semaphore, and s.l will give me the list of processes that are waiting to get access to that semaphore. Okay, and this will also bring us to new definitions of P of S and V of S. So P of S operation, the value of S must be decremented by 1 in the first opening statement. So S dot value will be equal to S dot value minus 1. Then you check what is the value of S. If S dot value is less than 0, then you add this process to S dot L and block this process. This is what I'm writing. So blocking means you put the process in the wait state. As long as the process is in the wait state, it will not consume any CPU time. Only when the process is in the ready state, that will consume CPU time. Okay. Now, being in the ready state doesn't essentially mean that it will consume a CPU time. Basically, the CPU scheduler will decide when the process in the ready queue will get access to the CPU time. Okay. So anyway, that is not the point. Now, the point is here. As I said, when you put it in the block state, you are basically putting it in the wait state. Now, when a process is in the wait state, it cannot wake up by itself. We need to have some mechanism to wake it up from the s.l list and move it to the ready state. Okay, so this thing we have to remember. Okay, similarly, we can define the V of S operation also. Firstly, S dot value will be incremented by 1. After that, it will remove one process waiting for the semaphore variable S from S dot L. This one. Okay. Now, this may mean whichever is at the header of the list, that will be removed by the V of S operation. After that, it will implement a wake up, that is change the state of the process from its earlier wait state in s.l to ready state in the ready queue, and we can finally end. Give me a minute, okay? Please give me a minute. Okay. So it will implement the wake up here, change the state of the process to the ready state, move it to a ready state in the ready queue, and we can finally end here. Now, let's say a process executes the P of S statement when S is initialized to 1. Let's try to understand how P of S and V of S operates now. So let's say a process executes the P of S statement when S is initialized to 1. That is, S dot value is 1. So what will happen here? Your S dot value will become 0 because it is decremented by 1 now. Now, since S dot value is less than 0, because it is 0, not less than 0, since S dot value is not less than 0, sorry. So since S dot value is not less than 0, the process will enter into the critical section. Okay. The next process that wants to enter the critical section will now again execute the P of S statement. It will find that the current S dot value will be less than 0. Okay. So it will enter S dot L and will be blocked. Okay. And it will wake up only when the first process comes out of the CS and executes the V of S statement. So remember that construct, you have P of S followed by the critical section, then followed by the V of S. Okay. So when it executes the V of S statement, that is the process that leaves the critical section, what it will do is it will restore the S dot value to less than or equal to 0. Then removes the process in S dot L and puts that into the ready queue. And subsequently, the process that is put in the ready queue will enter the critical section. Okay. So by this way, we can avoid busy waiting because the process waiting for the same semaphore variable has been blocked or is in waiting. Okay. So this is the basic concept behind using record-based semaphore to avoid the busy waiting problem. And we will stop this class today here. Okay. And we will move on with the rest of semaphores and deadlocks in the next class. Okay. Okay. So, someone please tell me, for your second biweekly assignment, what was the syllabus? Did it included operating system?
No, sir. It was till the mid-sem part.
Okay, it was till the mid-sem. ठीक है. ठीक है. Oh, one more thing that needs to be told about it. So basically, if we signify that semaphore can be, okay, semaphore is of two types. This one I missed. The semaphore variables are basically of two types. One is what is known binary. Yes. One is what is known as a binary semaphore, which can range only between 0 and 1. Okay. So we have used the example of binary semaphore so far to explain all our problems. So it is basically used with the help of a variable called mutex, and we popularly call it as a mutex lock because if it is 1 or 0, you basically use it for mutual exclusion problem. And the other is what is known as counting semaphore, whose value can range over an unrestricted domain. Okay. And this unrestricted domain thing can be accounted for here. Okay. So if your s dot value is running in negative, that is, let's say if your s dot value is, let's say, -3 or -4, it basically means that there are 3 processes that are waiting in your s dot l to get access to that particular semaphore variable. Okay. So for binary semaphore, the maximum of s dot value will be equal to 1. And in case of counting semaphore, the maximum of s dot value will be equal to the total number of processes, total number of resources. Okay. So if the number of resources is 3 for your machine, then s dot value maximum can be initialized to 3. Yeah, so it can handle 3 processes at a time. That is the basic idea. Okay, so we will stop this lecture on semaphore critical. So basically we started with process synchronization using producer consumer process, and we defined the producer consumer process using a co-begin-co-end construct, and while entering with a count statement, we arrived at the problem of critical section. We learned about the solution, the basic solution requirements for critical section problem, that is mutual exclusion, progress, and bounded waiting. And basically, if any code has a critical section, then this is the general structure. And then we moved on to the concept of what is known as semaphore variable. And with the help of semaphore variable, so semaphore variable basically has this type of construct. So this is the equivalent construct of a critical section. Okay. So where P mutex is basically your entry section, and V mutex is basically the exit section. So whenever you can also write a general sectioning of code if you are using semaphore variable. And with the help of semaphore variable, we saw how we can execute process synchronization as well as mutual exclusion. So this one is a case of mutual exclusion, and this one is a case of process synchronization. And we saw in depth how we can define a precedence graph with the help of semaphore variables within a co-begin and co-end construct. And we also saw that this essentially leads us because we want to avoid the busy waiting problem. Because if you have 2 processes which are waiting for another process to get over and have P of S statement being executed, so they will be on waiting in the while loop, but will be using the CPU time until and unless the first process or V of A or the corresponding V of A statements are being finished execution. It has finished executing. So this is basically what is known as the busy waiting problem. And to get rid of this busy waiting problem, what we are doing is we are basically redefining the semaphore variable into a record-based construct or a structure-based construct, which is also known as record-based semaphore, where you have 2 fields. One is the value and the other is the list, which stores the list of the processes that are waiting for the same semaphore variable. And using this construct, you can essentially avoid the busy waiting problem, because the processes that are waiting for the semaphore variable, or basically V of S, to be executed will now be separately waiting in your s.l list without using your CPU time. Okay, so we stop here and we will move into deadlocks, readers, writers problems on all those stuffs in the next class. So please answer to your attendance. One is not there. Roll number 2. Roll number 2 is there. Roll number 3.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. Roll number 2.
I know. Roll number 4. 4 is not
Sir.
there. 4 is
4.
yes. Okay.
Sir, roll number 3.
5,
Present.
6,
Present, sir. Phone number 6.
7,
Present, sir.
8,
Yes, sir.
9,
Yes, sir.
10,
Yes, sir.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 is present,
Yes, sir.
17,
Yes, sir.
17, 18. What, 17 or 18?
Yes, 17, sir. 17.
18,
Present, sir.
19, 20, 21,
Present, sir.
21,
Yes, sir.
22,
Yes, sir.
23,
Yes, sir.
24, 25, 25 is he here? Okay, roll number 1 and Anirban is present.
Yes, sir.
Pushpan, did you take?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The roll number 3 is also present and 25 also. They have message.